Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at something every single real estate investor deals with, but surprisingly few have actually mastered. We're talking about the absolute smallest pile of money in real estate that, somehow, carries the absolute highest legal risk. Yep, we're talking about security deposits. Specifically, the literal ticking time bomb they represent for landlords operating right here in the Kansas City metro area.
You know, there's a famous saying in real estate. The security deposit is the smallest pile of money in a rental transaction and the one that triggers the most complaints. It sounds so simple, right? But just imagine you're a remote landlord sitting, say, 1,200 miles away. Your tenant moves out, and they think the place is totally spotless. Then you or your property manager walk in and find scuffed floors and an oven that is completely filthy. Both parties are looking at the exact same room, but reaching wildly opposite conclusions. And without the right documentation, a simple disagreement over a scratched door can instantly snowball into a cash flow killing demand letter.
To put this into perspective, the insights and methodology we're breaking down today come straight from Marcus Painter at Alpine Property Management. These guys are highly credible. They maintain an incredible 98% rent collection rate across more than 250 properties in the Kansas City metro. So they have this process down to an absolute science, keeping deposit disputes incredibly rare.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The cost of mistakes. 2. Missouri versus Kansas rules. 3. Wear, tear, and damage. 4. The power of photos. And finally, 5. Beating the 30-day clock. Let's start with Section 1. The cost of mistakes. We need to establish the real financial stakes of getting this wrong.
Because, spoiler alert, the legal systems in both of these states do not mess around when it comes to a tenant's money. The sheer scale of the penalties is actually staggering. If you miss a deadline or you just can't document your deductions, both states are going to punish you harshly. In Missouri, if a court finds you wrongfully withheld a deposit, the penalty is twice the amount you withheld. Over in Kansas, it's 1.5 times the amount wrongfully withheld. So it's incredibly clear why landlords must be proactive. A simple paperwork delay can literally double your financial liability.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Missouri versus Kansas rules. Navigating these differences is absolutely critical for metro area investors.
And the cross-state differences are actually pretty sharp. Over in Missouri, a landlord cannot demand a deposit larger than 2 months of rent. But cross over the state line of Kansas, and the maximum deposit on an unfurnished unit drops to just 1 month of rent. Now, Kansas does allow 1.5 months for a furnished unit, plus a separate pet deposit of up to half a month's rent. Interestingly, Missouri just wraps any pet fees right into its 2-month cap. Both states do give you a strict 30-day deadline to return the deposit or provide an itemized list of deductions. And one more thing to note, Missouri explicitly gives tenants the right to be present at a move-out inspection, provided they give reasonable written notice.
But here's the reality check, right? The legal codes themselves are pretty straightforward. The rules are not actually the hard part. The hard part is having the evidence and the timeline to back up every single dollar you keep. The real battleground in any deposit dispute is always going to be about proving your deductions with solid, undeniable documentation.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, wear, tear, and damage. This right here is the highly subjective line where almost every single dispute originates.
Both Missouri and Kansas are very clear about what you can legally deduct. You essentially have 3 main buckets: unpaid rent, damage that goes beyond ordinary wear and tear, and specific costs the tenant explicitly agreed to in the lease. Think unreturned key fees or specific cleaning charges. What you absolutely cannot do under any circumstances is charge a tenant for the ordinary aging of a unit, just from someone living there normally.
So the crucial point is knowing the difference between what you have to just eat as a cost of doing business and what you can actually charge for. Let's look at some real examples. Wear and tear you just have to eat includes things like faded paint after a 3-year tenancy, minor carpet matting in high-traffic areas, or small nail holes from hanging a few pictures. But damage you can confidently charge for? How about a cat urine-soaked carpet pad, a physically cracked interior door, or a burner grate literally melted onto the stovetop? That is actual, undeniable damage that a judge will absolutely uphold.
But wait, hold on. There is a massive trap here, and it catches a lot of people. It's called proration. Basically, you have to reduce a damage charge based on the age and useful life of the item. For example, trying to charge the full, brand new replacement cost for a 5-year-old carpet against a deposit, that is exactly the kind of deduction a Missouri or Kansas judge will heavily reduce. And when a judge reduces that, it can trigger that massive wrongful withholding penalty on your entire statement. You have to prorate for the age of the item.
Okay, Section 4, the power of photos. Because how do you actually prove all of this to a judge? Let me ask you, how exactly do documented move-in photos prevent payment disputes? I mean, it seems obvious, but how does this specifically satisfy judges in places like Jackson or Johnson counties?
The answer lies in a really methodical four-step process. First, you take time-stamped photos of every room, every appliance, flooring, walls, literally everything on day one. Second, you secure a signed move-in condition report from the tenant. Third, at move-out, you repeat that exact same shot list. And fourth, if there's damage, you send the before and after photos right inside the itemized statement. When a tenant sees an undeniable, side-by-side, factual comparison of a spotless oven on day one and a completely ruined oven on move-out, the objections usually just stop right there. It turns a heated, emotional argument into a cold, hard fact.
Finally, Section 5, beating the 30-day clock. Because even with perfect photos, you can still lose everything if you mess up the timeline. So how do we map this out? We call this the turnover sprint. The clock starts ticking on day one the minute possession is returned. Within week 1, you must do the inspection and figure out the make-ready scope for any repairs. And well before day 30, you must mail the itemized statement and any remaining balance. Why well before? Well, because a forwarding address might be sitting in a mailbox across the country, and mail takes time.
Listen to this part closely because it's absolutely crucial. Returning a perfect, fully documented, flawlessly photographed, itemized statement on day 35 exposes the entire deposit to the penalty. This 30-day limit is not a suggestion. If you're even 5 days late, you've violated the statute. In Missouri, that means the tenant can pursue twice the amount you withheld. Being late completely voids all your hard work.
Actually, a clean deposit outcome is written into the lease long before the tenant ever moves out. You need specific lease policies to stop these disputes early. Define your professional cleaning standards in plain text so there are absolutely no surprises. Demand a forwarding address in writing. Require that signed move-in condition report within the first few days of the lease. And importantly, disclose common deductions right up front, so an itemized statement never feels like retaliation. Basically, set the expectation on day one.
And the result of running a tight ship like this? 14 days. By running the deposit handling and the vacancy turns simultaneously, meaning inspecting, creating the deduction list, and scheduling vendors all at once, Alpine achieves an incredible 14-day average vacancy between tenants. Speed saves money on both ends. The turn doesn't wait on the paperwork, and the paperwork doesn't wait on the turn.
Which leaves us with one final critical question for you to ponder today. Will your next turnover in Kansas City end in a smooth transition or a small claim summons waiting in your mailbox? Look, as a remote investor, taking the time to audit your processes against Missouri and Kansas rules today is quite literally the only way to make sure you don't get burned tomorrow. Get those photos, know your state caps, and never ever beat that 30-day clock by a second late. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.